Hello, thanks for joining us today. In this video, we'll be going over International Coffee Day. What is it, what's going on, and how to make the most out of it. First International Coffee Day was on October 1st of 2015 on a cool, crisp, autumny morning, depending on your location, of course. It seemed like the perfect way to start your day with a coffee of your choice. International Coffee Day is a time to indulge yourself in one cup too many and to think about the world's coffee supply chain. Every cup starts out with the humble coffee cherry, typically sourced from countries located on the bean belt, stretching from just above to very far below the equator. To produce the flavour that you're used to, a few things are required. Coffee is a tropical plant which requires heat between 20 and 27 degrees, high humidity, rainfall, shade, usually sourced from banana trees or some kind of other plant that's beneficial to the soil the coffee plant is using. Then there's a specific topography as well of drain slopes between 600 to 1800 meters in altitude and rich with an abundance of organic material. If you're still with us so far, it's fair to say that you deserve a coffee for yourself. Often enough, your local coffee shop will be getting in on the celebrations and offering discounts and more, so they might be worth a visit after we're done here. The hardest and most vital part of the coffee production process is creating and maintaining the necessary conditions for its growth. The people on the ground cultivating these amazing plants are typically the ones left with an empty coffee cup at the end of the day. Smaller producers have been known to offer significantly better benefits to these producers as opposed to the larger, more concentrated coffee houses and chains. Sticking with a more local coffee spot will not only get you a fair product, but usually a better one as well. Once the coffee cherries are ready, they're picked and dried, and this can be done in various ways. Some are left out in the sun and turned by hand. Others undergo a process known as the wet process, which involves a lot of resources and promotes a more consistent end product, but usually at the lack of variety and personalization. The next step in the process is milling the beans. So they're hulled, polished, sorted, depending on the size and weight, and anything not up to standards is thrown away. At this point, we probably have something that most people would agree resembles coffee, but is very different in one distinct way. At this point, we have green coffee. Green coffee isn't something that's widely available, but if you get the opportunity, it's definitely worth trying. It has some benefits over roasted coffee, and some people say they actually prefer the flavour. I wouldn't be one of these people, but they're out there. This part here is what gets us to what most people recognise as coffee, the roasting stage, where you can have a dark, a light, or a medium roast, all with distinct flavour profiles. The coffee is heated with the intention of altering the flavour profile through a very sciencey term called the Maillard reaction, which can be confused with caramelization. Caramelization happens at a much higher temperature and is more similar to actually burning the sugars in something. Roasting is often the most expensive part of the process, or at least where a lot of the markup gets added. Since roasting greatly shortens the shelf life, it needs to typically be consumed as quickly as possible after this. Since the flavor is dull over time, the less desired traits become more pronounced, and this can happen very quickly. More coffee shops and houses have begun to invest in putting time and effort into setting up their own in-house roasting processes, which can offer some really unique and interesting blends. If you're watching this before this year's International Coffee Day, then I would suggest maybe trying to learn some new barista skills or organizing some kind of coffee event, since I know I already have some activities on my schedule. It's a pretty good time to ask around and find out about those coffees that you see on the menu in a coffee shop but you have no idea what they are. Try a Mazagran, a Yuan Yang, a Franzen Canner, definitely not saying that one right, a Gallo Affogato, or a Nitro Brew. They're all things that I wasn't really familiar with before I started looking into actually making this video as well, and I think some of them I want to try, others I'm not quite sold on just yet. The darkest secrets of the coffee industry is just how old some of the beans can be by the time they actually reach the customers. Sometimes they can be sitting on a shelf in a warehouse for months by the time they even get shipped out, and the best days are long behind them. One of the biggest limiting factors, and oddly enough driving factors towards most people's consumption of coffee is caffeine. Too much, you get the jittery, shaky, heart racy feeling. Caffeine is actually the plant's natural defense mechanism against other plants. The maximum daily recommended intake of caffeine is about 400 milligrams, and the amount of caffeine per cup can vary wildly. Some cups could have between 300 and 400 milligrams, where others might even be struggling to pass 100. Normally I'd have maybe one or two on a weekday, have a milky one maybe in the morning, and then a stronger, richer one later on towards the afternoon. But then if it's a really busy day, I might have like a really sweet one in the evening as well, actually. But that kind of brings us on to the whole caffeine dependence issue, which can occur within 7 days of continuously drinking coffee. I think that is a lot faster than I actually realized. And some people's instincts would be to, you know, I'll just have more. I'll have another cup, it'll be fine, but this just makes starting off even harder, and that first cup just all the more less effective. So you'll be more tired to begin with. The dopamine receptors in your brain aren't working properly. You're not starting off the day on your best foot, no. There's a lot of good coffee out there, but there is also a lot of bad coffee as well. Sometimes it needs a little extra cream and sugar to help it out. And then there's some people who seemingly feel the need to put salt and butter in their coffee, but I've never really understood that, since that's what popcorn is for. Like a lot of the places I'd associate bad coffee with would be airlines, petrol stations, vending machines. One of the best steps you can probably take to avoid ending up in this situation is to get yourself a nice little home brewing setup. I'd recommend a nice little French press or a mocha pot, and then there's a million different kinds of coffees to choose from. You go from spending fistfuls of cash every week on takeaway coffees to probably a couple of cents per cup. At this point now, it feels like something I can do better at home. Every time I have to grab a coffee somewhere, and I get a bit salty about that. There's a million other YouTube videos out there about home setup and coffee recommendations, and suggest going to watch one of those. But if you are heading out to your local coffee shop this International Coffee Day, make sure to help out your barista. Have your order in mind already. I've gotten stuck behind a couple of people who've taken quite a while to make up their minds recently. Just try to keep things flowing smoothly. Thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Please consider subscribing, liking the video. I have some more stuff on the way that if you like this, then I think you could like as well. But have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.